an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering the Afterparty, Season 2, Episode 4, Hannah. In this episode, we find out that Grace was having an affair with Hannah. I cannot believe that this possibility didn't occur to me. I just never even considered it. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Max for commissioning this episode. Y'all, this came as such a surprise. It's the sort of thing that really exposes how heteronormative I still am, despite feeling like I have gotten past that. I just never even considered that maybe Grace was bi because she was marrying a dude, which is like the most blinkered view of sexuality. Plenty of people are bi or pan and just happen to be in what looks like a heterosexual relationship. And it's not. It's not really. They're both queer. Maybe one of them is trans. You just don't know. And I am low-key embarrassed, ashamed that I never even thought, well, perhaps Hannah and Grace both are into women, and what would that mean? Because I said how much I enjoyed the fact that they seemed to be close and really get along well, but the idea of a romance, if Hannah had been a dude, I would have immediately gone, oh my God, is there something happening between them? But because Hannah's a woman, I'm just not even thinking in that direction. I have got to get it together. Come on, Natasha. So, this episode was indeed done in the style of Wes Anderson. I was very surprised that I turned out to be exactly on key for that, because I sort of expected that. I didn't think that they would make that specific a choice, just because the other genres that they have imitated are whole genres. And I don't really know what you call the genre that Wes Anderson goes with. You know what? I'm going to look up his name, and I'm just going to see what the Wikipedia page, calls it. Because, we all know the style when we see it. Everybody is fully centered, and there's a lot of symmetrical shots of doorways on either side, or an elaborate building that you shoot the person dead center in the middle of the building. Really, really bright, bold colors that usually are somehow coordinating with the clothing of the person in the shot. And overall, a lot of his films sort of miss for me, but I will say that the hotel, I can't remember what it is called, but that movie was so much more affecting than I was prepared for, because his style is so sort of twee. Grand Budapest Hotel, that's what it's called. That I expect the story he's telling to be a little bit vapid and shallow. And so when there's actual emotion to it, it always catches me off guard, because I wrongly assume all style and no substance. And that's sort of what happens with Hannah's POV as well, is I'm going into it kind of rolling my eyes a little bit at Hannah being, it felt for just the first minute, she is very affected. And it didn't take long for me to start to be never mind. No, she's not. This is really who she is. This isn't a put on sort of personality. And to be clear, even if somebody is putting on a personality, so what? But it is it is the sort of thing that you can feel the difference when somebody is going with a certain aesthetic because it feels true to them versus when somebody seems to be going with an aesthetic because they are using the expectations for the type of person they want to be as a template for what to do because they don't actually have they don't have the innate drive to choose a certain thing. There's a difference between I'm going to pick the black, like gothic looking thing because that look is so beautiful and it really speaks to me and I just love it versus, I don't know, I guess I'm kind of like the goth girl and that one's the most goth. So I'll go with that one, which there's just a different vibe when it's that. It doesn't really matter in the end, but I think it feels a little bit less authentic to a lot of us when it's the second one. And I think that there's like something in me that I didn't really understand for a long time, but as I have grown to understand a little bit more what it means to be like neurodivergent, I didn't realize how much I valued sincerity and authenticity in people because I didn't understand that what I reacted negatively to was a sense of falseness. And I think that's like where it comes from for me is like, I will see a certain look being used by people as a shortcut to a personality, if that makes sense, and make a judgment call about that. And it just makes me, it's not like I'm saying that makes them a bad person. It just makes them somebody I am less interested in actually getting to know or be friends with because they don't actually seem to have the same like really strong, decisive interest in it that I was hoping for from somebody who would, you know, I'm really trying to like parse what I mean here. And I don't know if I'm succeeding, but, and this can happen with here talking about it with like the Wes Anderson sort of aesthetic. This is a particular type of aesthetic that I think gets a lot of people really irritated. But this can happen with all kinds of different aesthetics. And I keep using that word. I think I'm just going to keep using it. Like when I went to Owen's high school reunion, I was one of like 2 brunettes. And I was the only girl not wearing a sundress and cowboy boots. Every girl there was wearing a sundress, cowboy boots, and had blonde hair with like highlights worn straight with a bit of a wave as long as they could grow it. All of them. I'm not trying to exaggerate here. I didn't expect it. And I walked in and was like, where am I? Because and they were all slender as well. So as a plus size, curly haired brunette wearing a like 50s swing dress and heels, I just did not fit in at all. And they were very like, I didn't feel, you know, but it was definitely the sort of thing that made me kind of go, do you all genuinely feel like this look is you? Or do you all just not really have a lot of imagination and you do whatever it is that you see the people around you doing because you haven't learned to develop your own style? And I think for a lot of people, the vast majority, they don't develop their own sense of style. They just sort of copy, and they do that without really considering why. It's valid to just copy if you saw something that you really liked and you're like, that's what I want. But even within that, you should expand on that. Anyway, Ariel says, twee postmodern, quirky indie, darkly nostalgic. As the, I'm looking at the Wes Anderson wiki now. And it says, his films are known for their eccentricity, unique visual and narrative styles, and frequent use of ensemble casts. They often contain themes of grief, loss of innocence, and dysfunctional families. Some critics cite Anderson as a modern-day example of an auteur. 3 of his films have appeared in BBC Culture's 2016 poll of the greatest films since the year 2000. But yeah, Grand Budapest Hotel is probably the only film of his that I watched and really was affected by and felt resonated with me. And the others, while they dealt with darker themes, just didn't hit for me and felt really like they were holding me at arm's length somehow. But the all this to say that I judged Hannah initially in the assumption, and I think it's because being a white woman and clearly living in a family that has money, I leapt to the conclusion that it's all a put on because probably she has always had whatever it is that she needs. And so she attempted to create a personality of quirkiness for herself to set her apart from the family that seems to be really sort of dysfunctional in a boring, predictable kind of way, you know? And I just really misjudged her. She actually seems to have come to all of her interests in a pretty organic way and from a child, you know, not something that she was sort of like a preppy chick who once she hit college suddenly decided to go left and do a thing. And again, there's not anything actually wrong with that, but it would make me see her as a person a little bit differently. So the episode begins with Zoe just really going hard about how it's obviously Hannah who committed the murder. And I understand so much that Anik loves Zoe, that he doesn't want to make her angry. He doesn't want to accuse her sister outright. But what Zoe says when they're like, we have to go in there with a certain attitude because we want her to actually speak with us. You get that, right? It's Danner who says that. She turns around and says, oh, come on. I found the murder weapon. And plus her typewriter key was in Edgar's pocket. And I just wanted to be like, and? I wanted somebody to just say, so? The murder weapon is something that I'm sure she could have talked to numerous people about the fact that it was poisonous and psychotropic, and plenty of people could have used it. And as for the typewriter key being in his pocket, how does that mean anything? What are you even suggesting happened there? You think the killer put her typewriter key in his pocket? Does that sound like something that makes any sense? Do you think that he was near her and she just happened to drop it and he picked it up and then she killed him? What are you even talking about? This assumption makes no sense, but it doesn't feel like anybody is willing to actually call her out on that. And eventually we get to a point where she just straight up breaks with them entirely and is like, I am going to conduct my own investigation. And I was like, I really hope you do. And good luck with that, because you're approaching everything in the wrong mindset, and you are going to either outright jeopardize things by fucking around with evidence in a way you shouldn't because you don't like what it's telling you, or you're going to alienate people so completely because of the way that you come at them asking questions that they won't speak with you. So good luck. But we won't get there for a little bit. So first, we go into this yurt. And Hannah immediately is like, oh, devil's trumpet, I see. So you think that because that's maybe what killed Edgar and that's what I grow in my garden, then I must have killed him. So should I get a lawyer, or are we just going to go to my executions right away? And she sort of laughs about this. When Danner is like, we're not here to accuse you. Zoe immediately says, I am, and then says, why do you have Edgar's dead lizard? Hi, again, I just really want to point out the lizard's dead. I feel like that's really significant. If the lizard eats whatever he eats, I'm like, did he give her some of the thing that drugged him? And, like, is that what happened? No, nobody's asking, how did the lizard die? It's almost like they're accepting that if Edgar is dead, his lizard also must be dead. Because they both are, like, it's just the two of them are connected in such a way. And I'm just like, I want more people to ask about the alert on his watch that made him walk away. Because it very clearly said, I'm pretty sure, his lizard's name, Roxana, was it? Anyway, he says Roxana as he walks away. So that's why I think I assumed that's what it was about. What is going on with the lizard? Lauren says, everyone not telling Zoe she's being unreasonable is one of my biggest pet peeves of this season. Agree. At least so far. Hard agree. It's like, it's the sort of thing that I feel like if Zoe were any other character behaving this way, everybody would be on her ass. But because she's sort of a main that we are meant to like, we don't call her out for it the way that we would otherwise. And it just gives the whole affair a sense of like real unprofessional, and we're not professionals, although Danner kind of should be more of one based on what she has done for a living. But I just really feel like it's something that if she is going to be going this hard, and I guess it is in the end, like, that she decides to break away from them, but nobody breaks away from her. She's the one who decides, I guess I should conduct my own investigation, and gives Anik this very accusing look. And I maintain, you guys, I kind of want Grace to have been the murderer at this point. I sort of want it to be that Zoe's wrong and Grace killed Edgar. I don't really like, beyond the fact that Zoe is so certain it's not Grace. I don't have anything against Grace as a person. She seems lovely. But I'm so frustrated with how Zoe's acting that I just want her to be proven wrong at this point for the sheer pettiness of it. So anyway, this Hannah does like, what do you call it when you like stuff dead animals? And I am assuming was going to do that to the lizard as well. So Anik says, we're here because Travis said that you wanted to stop the wedding. And she says, I did, very much so. And as she says that, her eyes start to turn red and she gets really like kind of fogged up, and I really thought her acting for her whole section was really beautifully done. It was like subtle in a way that I wouldn't expect for this kind of comedy. I just was very, very impressed with this actress, and I don't know what else she has been in, if there's something that I would have recognized her in, or if I am not recognizing her here, and you tell me she's in some other thing, and I'd be like, oh my God, really? Was that her? But she isn't familiar to me at all in the face. Her voice felt a little familiar, and I kind of wondered if maybe she had done some voice work, but I don't know. It may just be similar to somebody else's voice. So she, I love this. She gets out a record, Belle and Sebastian, and she puts, I love it that it's like a vertical record player. I have never seen that before. Delightful. So she's setting the scene here. And she pulls out a photo of herself as a child. And she tells the story in third person, calling herself Hannah. And I love, it starts off with Hannah and all of these men like building the yurt. She being like adopted. I still think that her not knowing who her parents are is going to turn out to be significant. There's just a feeling for me of we're going to find out something about that. And I don't know if it's going to turn out to be key to the murder, if it's going to feel like it should be key to the murder and it's going to turn out to actually have nothing to do with it. You know, I do not know. But, yeah, these dudes are building the yurt behind her, and we hear that architecture is one of her many hobbies. Hannah was denied proper affection as a child. And we see her doing taxidermy and then what's called macabre horticulture, because she goes after plants that are, you know, psychotropic or deadly. Carving wooden anchors, and I just love when she throws the anchor in the water and it floats, proving utterly useless as an anchor. That shit cracked me up so bad. Having a frigid mother and an absent father brought her and Edgar together. And we see her playing with him doing the archery thing in a very kind of Wednesday Addams sort of deadpan way. Sebastian would often join as well. Despite presumably having his own family in England, he was a regular fixture at the Minnows' home. I thought that kind of seemed significant as well. Despite having a she's assuming, but the energy of it feels like she doesn't know who his parents are, even now that they are adults. That, like, he was always around as a kid, and she never really understood why. And by this point in her life, she has sort of accepted that he's like a fixture, but she hasn't ever actually discovered what his relevance is. And I am starting to wonder if he is an actual relative as well. Is the accent real? Was he, like, related but then just brought up in England, so the accent is real, but actually he's American? Like, there's just something about the way that he is part of things all the time that feels like it has to mean something, but we don't really find out about this. Like, I'm sort of thinking Jon Snow, that dad knocked some broad up and mom agreed to take the kid in, maybe not knowing, or maybe knowing, or maybe it was an unspoken thing that, like, she assumed, but they never really talked about it. I don't know. And this is also when we find out that they were into doing magic tricks, which makes sense about all of his books on magic that were in his study. And I also feel like the magic thing is going to turn out to be somewhat significant in terms of, like, maybe a sleight of hand, that something that was pulled at some point. Then we find out Judaism was also another thing, and we have all of them, like, hanging out and releasing doves, and I think that it's Sebastian holding the Torah, and then vintage typewriters. As they grew older, Edgar became more dogged about his financial endeavors and lost interest in their mutual hobbies. And we see her just being kind of irritated with him, but she still loves him. And then celebrating a birthday, and she says, it's actually my adoption day. I don't know when I was born. Again, what the fuck? Like, how do you have an adoption of a child who knows absolutely nothing and that came with no information? The way that it's described with her building a yurt, she looks like she was like maybe 9 years old, 10 years old. So she was old enough that there should have been some identifying information. Or maybe that's supposed to just be when we are going to start the narrative, but she had been with them since birth. But just the fact that we don't really know anything, even after listening to her whole narrative, we don't know anything about Hannah's origins. She doesn't actually share any of that. Is kind of suspect to me. Why is it that she wouldn't mention it? Or if she really doesn't know, why hasn't she found out? She's old enough now that I feel like she could do some research on this. And if nothing else, you get a blood test and there's, you know, DNA matching out there. You could find something. But the again, way that all of this is filmed and the colors and the symmetrical quality of all of the shots. It's just really, it's very affecting, it really establishes a mood. So then we have the moment where Edgar shows up and has brought her a vintage typewriter for her birthday. And he is there with his lizard and with Grace and introduces her to Grace. And immediately there's a vibe of like her being like, oh my God, this is a perfect gift. And Edgar is like, oh, my phone's ringing, excuse me. And he leaves. And as soon as he walks away, I was like, oh my God, wait a second. And yes, indeed, that is where we are going. The two of them hit it off here. There's a moment of them just like really deeply appreciating this what seems to be really rare typewriter. And then we jump to Amsterdam, where Hannah and Grace are on the water, like rowing a rowboat together. And this is when Zoe chimes in and is just like, hold on a second. You were in Amsterdam with Grace? She didn't even tell me that. And she's looking really sort of put out by it. So we kind of get the explanation. On an overcast Saturday afternoon, exactly 37 days before the wedding, Grace and her bachelorette party congregated by Lake Swellgood. The lake is forested with maple, redwood, and orange blossom trees. There were spa treatments, arts and crafts, and a mime who was also a stripper. It was your perfect bachelorette. Except that Grace was fighting with Zoe. And we see the two of them. This is so funny. They're standing down by the water. There's like a white picket fence, roses in the shot. Each of them is wearing a sort of like ultra feminine ruffled sundress. The one that Zoe's wearing is like red check, and the one that Grace is wearing is like cream colored lace. And she's literally stomping and yelling like with this little, like the dress almost looks like it could be one of those christening gowns for a baby. And so the way that she's stomping and like sort of looking like she's having a tantrum further makes her look like a giant child. And it was a really weird sort of look to it. She's describing the argument between Zoe and Grace. And Zoe sort of interrupts and is like, I wasn't yelling. I was just worried about her, because that's how older sisters are. And she says, if you want, I could just say you were intensely whispering, which Grace replies with, well, that wasn't what happened either. And I felt like that was sort of interesting, that she appears to be just kind of like saying things in whatever makes the best sense story-wise, but evidently being accurate isn't of huge importance to her, So I don't know how much that pervades the story, but then we have her sitting next to Grace and just doing the whole, like, are you angry because your sister's right or wrong? And overall, the conversation eventually goes to, what do you want? And she says, I want love. I want heart-bursting, mind-exploding, nipple-chilling love. She says nipple-chilling. I love that so much. I found that hilarious. And this is when they have their first kiss. And it's actually Grace who kisses Hannah. But Hannah clarifies that it was super consensual. Like, I was very, very into it. Which leads to the two of them having this like ongoing affair. And Zoe is, I don't know if Zoe was aware that Grace was bi or not. She doesn't seem to be shocked by that. She's just like at first going, you kissed my sister. And Hannah's like, no, clarify this point. She kissed me. But it leads to Zoe like leaving the yurt to go and confront her sister about it. She tries to be like, well, why wouldn't she have told me? And Danner is like, because probably you were yelling at her a lot and she didn't feel like she could confide in you. And Anique says, or maybe because it makes her look really, really guilty. So yeah, the whole way that she takes off here, she doesn't even want to listen to the remainder of what Hannah is saying. And that for me just really seals the deal on Zoe. She just says, why should we listen? She's obviously lying. Any good investigator will tell you, even when people are lying, they're telling you stuff. That's the nature of crime and lying, is that people slip up. They lie in the wrong place at different times. They don't keep their story straight. Or if there is one particular part of the story they do keep straight, maybe that's true, that part. You know, like there's a lot about the way that she handles this that felt so childish to me. And if I actually wanted to exonerate my sister, I would be a lot more willing to listen to every piece of evidence I could find. I wouldn't just write people off because, you know, especially since she hasn't confirmed or denied that this has happened with Grace. And then she goes and talks to her and finds out, yes, indeed it did. So she has just walked out of this whole thing and doesn't get to hear the rest of the story. And I'm sort of wondering if something is going to happen later, that it's going to turn out maybe if Zoe had listened to the whole story, she wouldn't have handled things the way that she eventually does. You know, like maybe there's a reason the plot needed her to leave at this point. But it may just have been so that we could also cut away to Grace and get the confirmation from her that this actually all happened. And this is when Anique is like, we should hear her out. And she gives him a look and says, you know what? I think it might be better for all of us if we conduct separate investigations. And that is clearly her also being like, and you're not sleeping in the room with me tonight. You're sleeping somewhere else. Like, look, I don't have a lot of respect for a person who cannot face reality. I understand that we all have our hangups in that department, but you've got to recognize when that's happening. And at this point, am sort of like, Anique, let her go. If she's going to be like this about it, you don't want to be married to a person like this. Like, anyway, Danner tells him not to go because that's sister shit. So he remains. And the whole like attempt at the conversation between Grace and Zoe, they're in this very quiet living room where everybody seems to just sort of be sitting and reading, doing real quiet time activities that make it so that them having a very low whispered conversation is actually hugely distracting instead of subtle. And eventually they leave to have the conversation outside, which is what should have happened from the start. Zoe, you're coming in here to talk to her about potentially having had an affair while her dead husband is upstairs. Fucking tell her, can I talk to you? And bring her out of the, like, what are you even doing? Are you that stupid? So at this point, we have the Sebastian moment where he comes in and asks Fang for help. And he asks that question that everybody who is not absolutely white presenting has been asked, which is, what are you? And I have been asked this a lot, which is really wild because I present as fairly white, but apparently like not enough. And it's always one of those questions that I just want to be like, I know what you mean to ask me, but you could phrase it in the way you mean instead of just acting like you're some weird compilation of non-human features, you know, like enough. But it turns out that he is trying to broker this deal with somebody in Korea, and he needs a person to do the translating. And Feng decides to sort of draw it out to attempt to make it seem like he was much more effective at the job, when in fact the dude on the other end of the line isn't putting up much resistance at all, and immediately is just like, no, yeah, I'm on board for the original like 5 million, I think was the deal that he goes with. So Sebastian is delighted with him, but after we find out later that like there's a whole thing going on that Sebastian isn't copping to about having been fired and pretending to still be an employee when he's not, I have no idea what to think of this, you know? So nothing but bings. Oh my God. I forgot that he says that. That's such a weird phrase. The Feng is a bowl of Bing. That's what it is. A bowl of Bing. I really enjoy that he keeps doing it, even though it doesn't really seem to mean anything. Maybe it does mean something, and we just haven't caught on yet because we're not with it. Maybe he's just ahead of the curve. Streets ahead, if you're a community viewer. But anyway, so he tries to like connect Feng, trying to like suggest that maybe they go in on a business together, and Sebastian just walks away while he's mid-sentence, and it just obviously Feng has been used in this way that is pretty gross, and I am wondering if he is going to harbor any resentment in that respect, or if he's just as good-natured and roll with the punches as he seems to be. Also, still don't know what the deal is between him and his brother. So this is when we go to like the montage of Grace and Hannah hooking up, and it's like every single time Grace is saying we can't keep doing this, and Hannah keeps saying okay, but they still do keep doing this. Like there's, let's see, day 21 we're on, day 25, we're jumping ahead a lot in time. But yeah, they're clearly super into each other. And it's such a shame because later on when Zoe asks Grace, were you in love with Hannah? She says, no, it was a fling. And I just don't believe her. Like, maybe it's that I don't want to believe her because their connection seems so real. And Hannah, I actually grew to like her so much that I didn't want to believe that she would just be cast aside by Grace. Like, I really wanted her for this to be reciprocated, and felt sad when Grace dismissed it as like, of course not. And it makes me like, if Hannah is the murderer, if some of the things that seem sort of inconsistent about her story are because she is hiding things and is the murderer, having killed Edgar for somebody who wasn't actually in love with her is devastating. Like, that would be truly awful. I have often thought about this because, like, there are, as somebody who listens to a lot of Snapped episodes, those who don't know, Snapped Women Who Kill is a TV series that has been transformed into like a podcast. And it's all about women murderers. And a lot of the time, the motivations tend to range from wanting money to wanting custody of children to jealousy over a romantic relationship. And those are like the three main ones. Custody of children comes up a ton. But the concept of like murdering and not like it all being for nothing because the person wasn't actually into you, that happens like a lot. The person who commits the murder really believes once this is all done and that person is out of my lover's life forever, they will choose me as their partner forever. And it will often turn out, no, they could see that something about you was unbalanced and willing to commit murder, and they didn't want anything to do with you, but you mistook it as, oh, this other person is interfering in the relationship, when in fact it was you. You were the problem. And I just get the impression that Hannah is genuine when she talks about liking Edgar, and I think that if she had killed him and it turned out to be for nothing, she would be really cut up over it. But I just don't think she would have killed him. It doesn't seem like she had that kind of like anger toward him. She didn't blame him for not being able to be with Grace. It wasn't personal like that to her. She just understood they, both were into her. So this is the point at which they have their conversation sitting in the window seat of her bedroom about going away to Paris together. And Grace is like, I'm marrying your brother next week. And she says, well, then we'll go after. It's just an assumption on her part. Yeah, you'll marry my brother, but we'll definitely keep on having this affair, right? And I think that it's kind of funny because, like, I am certain folks do this, right? They get married already fucking around on the side and just assume we'll just keep doing it this way. I'm certain this is a thing. And considering how easy it seems to have been for them to carry on together right under his nose because he is never around, I think they probably could have gotten away with it for quite a long time. I don't know if Edgar would ever have been able to tell. Like, they maybe would get sloppy, but I think probably this could have worked if Grace didn't have a conscience about it. But she's clearly really, like, as the wedding approaches, she's like, we're going to be saying vows to each other in front of people, and I cannot do that while knowing I have no intention to actually be faithful to him. So this is when she says, like, we've got to stop. Hannah says okay in that indulgent way that she has been for all of that montage. But Grace is like, I feel like I've been really awful to him. And Hannah just says, yeah, we both have. And Grace says, I'm sorry. And she, like, gets up from the window seat and leaves. And Hannah says after her, but I'm in love with you, with this genuine sense of, like, confusion, you know, like, this doesn't make any sense. What? And so Hannah entered a state of mourning, and there's this point where her adoptive mother, she says, who's at the door? Your mother. But I don't know my mother. And then Isabel comes in. It's Isabel or Isabella, carrying this fucking helmet, like a full-on suit of armor style helmet. And she walks in and she says, did you order a suit of armor? And Hannah says, I don't think so. And she says, I guess I did. I like it. You look upset. Oh my God, you guys, her just being like, I like it. Hannah says, I am upset. And she just says, well, get over it, and leaves. And I have to mention that Hannah is in a bathtub reading The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat, which is about people who have, like, synapses in their brains that connect in the wrong places, so they can't look at an object and understand the name of it or what it is for. It's an interesting whole story, but she's reading that with a electric burner beside her on the, like, edge of the tub, and a couple of eggs are frying in the pan. I don't know what the fuck, if she was going to just eat those eggs in the bath, or if she was going to pull the burner in and kill herself using this electrical appliance. She's got a friggin' spatula. I don't know why you would use the electrical appliance to kill yourself if you were going to also make eggs. Like, unless you really want to make it look as if it was an accident, but it's actual suicide. I don't know what she was attempting there. But the whole setup of it is so weird. And anyway, Hannah, having been told, get over it, she's like, all right, I will. She just decides that's good advice. I'm going to go for it. But she realizes, like, I can't do that. I'm still in love with her. I can't just get over it. So we go then to the rehearsal dinner. And she presented on, like, this whole thing about all of the plants that were in the arrangements. And it shows her with, like, a full cork board and pictures of each of the plants pinned to it. I don't remember this, like, being done to this degree. I thought that she just talked about it, and I'm pretty sure that this is an exaggeration for her, you know, the style of story that she's trying to tell here. But evidently, the main thing that she wanted to do was set up a distraction by putting Anik on the spot and mentioning that he does drugs, and so he would know all about this stuff. And this leads to everybody looking at Anik in such a way that he doesn't notice when Grace gets up and leaves the table. Which, like, it was such a weird thing because I did notice that Grace left, but I didn't ask where she had gone. I wasn't really concerned about it, and I should have been. And she is asking Grace to come and talk to her and says, like, do you love him? And Grace says, yeah, of course I do. Not convincingly, by the way. I think she didn't. And I think she knows that she doesn't. Not the way that she should if she's getting married. And I think maybe she's lying to herself and that she is actually in love with Hannah and just doesn't want to face that. And Hannah says, come to my yurt tonight. And waits for Grace, but Grace doesn't show up. There's a weird moment with a videographer that she asks to take her picture. I don't know what that was about. And then we see her coming on to Travis and kissing him in an attempt to make Grace jealous. And she seems to really think that it worked, but I am not sure it did at all. The jealousy thing is supposed to be what spurs Grace to come, and she doesn't show. So it just didn't go the way that she wanted. So she decides that she's going to write Grace a letter, and she had typed my sweet Grace, and the G didn't type. There was something wrong with it. So she pulls the G key off, and it seems like there's some inspiration for her that, like, oh, maybe I'll do something with this. She ends up giving it as a gift to Edgar. Not totally sure why. I can't help but think we have been going at this whole thing as if Edgar has been poisoned via his drink. And I started wondering, is it possible Edgar could have been poisoned via touch? Is it possible there was something on the key that she gives him as a gift that when he touched it, it was absorbed and that killed him? I have no idea if there's a poison that works that fast that way. And I would think if it did act that way, that later on when Zoe picks it up, it would poison her too, unless it loses its effect after a certain amount of time. I don't know. But that's the only connection that I could see, because it does seem as if right around the point where she gives him that as a gift and they toast, that's when things start to go loopy for him. And the toast is very clearly centered as maybe this is the moment where she put something in his drink. And I'm starting to think the drink is a misdirect, and that it's actually, that's not the way that this got into his system at all. At this point, Sebastian shows up. And he comes in and says, I couldn't sleep, saw your light on, thought you might need some company. You look upset. And he has a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses, and he's standing there in his robe. Now, granted, he's wearing like pants and a buttoned up shirt underneath, it looks like. I don't know if maybe that's just his pajamas and they're formal looking pajamas. But when he comes in, he knocks over a bunch of stuff right by the door, like all of her anchors and things like that. He tells her, you're losing a brother and I'm losing a business partner. And she just basically is like, you need to fucking leave. And he's surprised, but he just agrees and leaves. And right before he goes, he attempts to fix the anchors and the whole display, and eventually drops it and just leaves. And I was sort of wondering what the deal is here, because it doesn't seem like her and Sebastian ever had a sexual relationship. So him doing this that night feels wildly out of character. And it seems weird to me that she isn't asking where this was coming from for him. There's, an implication that he was here to have sex. And I kind of, because she doesn't say that, I was like, maybe I'm misunderstanding because of the signals. But Danner says he showed up looking to get busy, and she just kind of shrugs. And when Danner says, "Are you hitting that too?" she says, "Oh, no, I don't find him attractive." And so why would he come to you acting like he's going to be down to fuck when he has never had that relationship with you before? Was he hoping to catch her with Grace? Did he know about the affair? It feels like this was a plant. Like he came in to do something, and whatever it was happened to be over here near her anchors. Like he picked something up or he planted something, and it was all this I'm so charmingly befuddled sort of thing. But there was a real motive behind it beyond what it looked like. And I just think it's kind of weird that Hannah isn't asking herself what that motivation was. So then we go to the conversation with Zoe and Grace, and her saying, "It was just a fling. I think I was confused." And Grace says, "It's all going to be fine then. Just no more secrets, because when you hide things, it makes you look more guilty." And Grace nods, but I feel like that was a nod of, yeah, no more secrets, definitely. It looked to me like she was definitely still hiding something. And she says, "I really don't think Hannah could have killed him, though." And Zoe says, "Well, somebody did, and maybe she was hoping it wasn't just a fling." And this made me sort of wonder, if Grace were the murderer and she actually had feelings for Hannah, would seeing that Hannah is really starting to look like the one get her to confess or do anything to try and change up where their attention is at the moment, I'm just wondering how far she would go. So she says, "I needed to meditate, Hannah, I needed to meditate and let off some steam because I was confused and frustrated that she didn't show up. So I was over here, doing the bow and arrow thing. And it turns out that she is really bad at it despite having done it all her life. And she nearly shoots Ulysses in the face, and he catches the arrow and knows the kind of longbow it is. She says that she bought it from the Louvre. Oh my God. And he takes a perfect shot. And it's so funny because the thing that he says is, "I spent some time among the Apache," as if he was with a native group fighting with or hunting with wooden bows and arrows in the wild or something. And then he's like, "Well, actually among one Apache. His name, he doesn't say his name. He just says, really nice guy. He's a data analyst now. He used to say, Ulysses, your aim is off because you're not shooting from here. You're shooting from here." And the Apache say, "Don't aim with your eyes, aim with your heart." And he tells Hannah not to give up. And she takes this as a sign that she should go for it with Grace. So she meets with Travis about stopping the wedding. And the plan they have is to do a whole does anybody object? And Travis would get up and he would present the evidence about how actually Edgar's a criminal. And this would bring everything to a screeching halt. Edgar would probably flee, trying to cover his own tracks, and they would perform a citizen's arrest. She would go under the box with Grace and tell her that she loves her, and they would wind up together, and that would be it. And this surprised me a lot. Danner, when we come back to the present, says, do you really think your brother's a criminal? And she says, no, he's just a capitalist. And she says it with this look on her face. I couldn't tell if she had actually looked at the evidence that Travis presented or not. Like, and as far as he's just a capitalist, that could mean a lot of things. That could mean, I think he's unethical, but no more unethical than anyone else. Or he's a criminal, but like unaware this is what he's doing, and he works with shady people doing things that he doesn't know about. Like, I don't know. Anik says, why would you expect him to run if you really didn't think he had done anything wrong? And she says, well, it wasn't a really well thought out scheme. And I felt like that was weak. That seemed for me like not enough, not nearly enough. There's a lot about this account that makes me suspicious of Hannah, even though I really like her. I don't want to be here, but, you know, it's starting to feel like a bit of a way. And I'm almost wondering, could it be that her and Grace did it together? Would that have been a thing? Because maybe it was a way for her to get her hands on the money as well. And because I don't know what she has access to as an adopted relative. Like, what is she entitled to in terms of the family's wealth? And she claims that she called off the whole, like, does anybody object? Because she listened to Edgar and Grace's vows, and she realized that he actually did love her. And we find out from her POV that his vows were like, when I look at you, my dopamine levels go from 16% to 37%. Norepinephrine from 12% to 26%. And the oxytocin rises to levels I've never known before, 23.2%. These are unprecedented moves. And she says it was the most raw emotion her brother had shown in his entire life. She knew there was no denying it. I love this because from Grace's perspective, she's like, he said, I make him want to be a better man. She like completely changes up what he said. And frankly, I'm a lot more willing to believe Hannah's version than his. I feel like Grace would not have been receptive to what he was saying the way he was saying it, because she has an idea of what romance should look like, and telling her the percentages of hormone reaction in his body is not it. Personally, as somebody who really enjoys data, I'm a big fan of this, but I can definitely understand why it wouldn't work for certain people. And, you know, this is when she's like, oh my God, this means that we both love her and one of us is going to have to be alone. So she just decides to like step back and let him be with her. Eventually the two of them are alone together for photos, and she tries to tell her like, I'm really happy for you, before she goes to her yurt, and begins to pack a bag. A gorgeous suitcase, by the way, you guys. It's this like embossed leather with like a black background. I mean, stunning. I want this suitcase so bad. It's really giving Amelie. I don't know how many of y'all have seen that movie, but it was pretty popular. It's a French film, but it's done very much in like a Wes Anderson style in a lot of ways. And she packed these like, you know, very old fashioned looking suitcases that got me on a real tear when I was in like high school, of using hard-sided vintage suitcases instead of like the much more practical plastic rolling kind. And I just didn't care because they were so pretty that I just was for the aesthetic much more than the practicality of it. Nowadays, you couldn't catch me using one of those anymore. A girl does not want to actually carry her bags. She wants to roll them and hand them over to somebody else to deal with. But, you know, there was a time. And we have her like packing, and then the after party, which is super sedate and everybody's just like reading or playing games, she goes over and speaks to Edgar. She does the toast with him. And I'm really trying to watch the way that this whole thing is set up with the toast, because Sebastian is over in the corner and he's like drinking out of like straight out of a bottle. It looks like the table between her and Edgar has their drinks on it already. It doesn't show her getting them the drinks. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Plus his glass is like a plain sort of lowball glass, and she has this really beautiful gilded, it almost looks like a sherry glass. It's very small. And simply beautiful. I want one. I want like just a set of 2. One for me and Owen. We don't need a whole set of like 8. We do not entertain, but 2 would be perfect. And I love Edgar being like, there's so many words you can't spell if you give me this G. Are you sure you want to do it? And she's like, number 1, yes. And number 2, I'm moving out effective today. So goodbye, Edgar. And she just gets up and leaves, but not before sort of bumping into Sebastian because he's drunk. And there's a moment of the 2 of them sort of dancing in place. And I really sort of, with the thing with the magic and the sleight of hand stuff that they were practiced in, either she or Sebastian could have planted something in one another's pockets at that point. So if anybody were to search them and find something, I wouldn't trust it, because it would feel for me like it's super possible that they each were able to like pin something on one another. And when we come back to the present, Danner is just like, I don't get it. You told us a story that really does make you look like a murderer. Like, you didn't try and hide your motive at all. And she's just basically like, I'm telling you what happened. I didn't kill him. I can't help that it looks that way, but I'm telling you the reality of it. And Anik is just like, hold on. Why is it that Sebastian was sad? You said that he was sorry that he was losing a business partner, but how would that even have worked? And he winds up getting up and taking off for the office. Danner follows him, but not before asking, are you going to try and get together with Grace after this? And she tries to claim, I don't know, but Danner's like, I feel like you do know. I think you do. And I liked that. She kind of calls her out because I think it's pretty clear as well. But yeah, he finds some names, and it had been like what Travis claimed were alternate personas that maybe Edgar was going to take on when he fled and faked his own death. But Anik is like, no. These are cover identities, or aren't cover identities. They're candidates for an executive headhunter. Edgar was looking for a new business partner because he fired Sebastian. And then we go to Sebastian, who is all alone in the garden, and he is imitating Edgar's voice with some convincing, I mean, that was not badly done. I probably would buy it if I were on the phone. I think I would. He imitates his voice, and as Edgar gives Sebastian complete, like, authority, as he calls it. And we see Sebastian sort of look anxiously back over his shoulder. And I just feel like this looks quite bad for him. And I'm sure once I find out things, maybe it will still look bad, but I may have some sympathy for it. I don't know. But as of right now, Sebastian has just not looked good from any perspective. You know, he really hasn't. So I am kind of looking forward to seeing his POV, because I want to know how he sees himself. And I also don't know what the genre is going to look like for him. I didn't look at his thumbnail. Let's see. We've got, he's in this thumbnail in looks like a green convertible with R's embroidered on the headrests. I don't know if that's a Rolls Royce or what the R is. And he's wearing a tux. It's giving Bond, so maybe sort of a James Bondish type of vibe. That would be fun. I would enjoy that. All right. I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you guys again so much for hanging out with me. I hope y'all are enjoying the coverage. I'm really having fun. I love doing these mysteries. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.